The blood-stained letter trembled in Tabitha Donovan's hands as she sat in the last pew of Sheridan's only church, her tears falling silently onto the paper that had shattered her world just hours before. Wyoming Territory, 1878, a harsh land that had just become infinitely harsher. Tabitha had read the letter a dozen times, though the words never changed. Her brother Matthew was dead, killed in a mining accident up in Montana Territory. He'd been her only family since their parents died 3 years earlier, and the monthly money he sent had kept her small millinery shop in Sheridan afloat. Now she was truly alone, with nothing but debts and a business teetering on the edge of failure. Pastor Mills droned on about divine mercy from the pulpit, but Tabitha couldn't hear him over the roaring in her ears. The morning sunlight streamed through the stained glass, casting colored shadows across the worn wooden floor, mocking her with its beauty. She'd come to the church seeking comfort, but found only emptiness and platitudes. The congregation stood for a hymn, but Tabitha remained seated, clutching the letter. She couldn't bear to stand, couldn't join in praising a God who had taken everything from her. She was aware of the stares, the whispers. In a town as small as Sheridan, everyone knew everyone's business. By sundown, they'd all know about Matthew. She didn't notice the man slide into the pew beside her until his calloused hand gently covered hers. Startled, she looked up into eyes the color of a summer sky. Dusty Grayson, the ranch hand, who occasionally came to town with cattle from the Diamond G, his uncle's spread south of Sheridan. He wasn't a regular churchgoer. In fact, she'd never seen him here before. "No man preaches over your pain," he whispered, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Come on, let's get out of here." Before she could protest, he was helping her to her feet, guiding her toward the side door, ignoring the disapproving glances from Pastor Mills and the congregation. Tabitha found herself following him, grateful for the escape. Outside in the clear morning air, Tabitha took a deep, shuddering breath. The sun was warm on her face, a stark contrast to the cold stone that seemed to have settled in her chest. "Thank you," she managed, her voice barely audible. Dusty nodded, keeping a respectful distance now that they were outside. "I saw you come in. You looked like you needed rescuing." He gestured to the letter still clutched in her hand. "Bad news?" "My brother," she began, then stopped, unable to say the words aloud. "I'm sorry," Dusty said, understanding immediately. "Matthew, right? Good man. He helped me break a horse once when I was passing through Montana." Tabitha looked up in surprise. "You knew him?" "Not well," Dusty admitted, "but well enough to know he was proud of his sister who ran her own business down in Wyoming." He hesitated, then added, "And well enough to know he'd want someone looking out for you right now." Tabitha stiffened. At 24, she'd worked hard for her independence. "I don't need looking after, Mr. Grayson." A hint of a smile crossed his face. "Never said you did. But everyone needs a friend sometimes." He gestured toward the cafe across the dusty street. "Let me buy you some coffee. You can tell me about your brother, or we can talk about the weather, or we don't have to talk at all." Something in his easy manner, the lack of pity in his eyes, made Tabitha nod. Coffee would be nice. The cafe was nearly empty, most of the town still at church. Dusty led her to a table by the window and ordered coffee from Mrs. Peterson, who wisely asked no questions about why they weren't at the service. When their cups arrived, steaming hot, Dusty spoke quietly. "My pa died in a mining accident when I was 16, up in the Dakota Territory. I know it doesn't help much to hear that, but I understand something of what you're feeling." Tabitha wrapped her hands around the warm cup. "Did it get easier?" she asked, meeting his eyes. "Eventually," he said honestly. "Not better exactly, just different. You find a way to carry it." They sat in silence for a while, drinking their coffee. Tabitha found it strangely comforting, having someone who didn't demand conversation or offer empty condolences. "I need to reopen the shop tomorrow," she said finally. "The bills don't stop coming just because—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Dusty nodded. "What can I do to help?" The simple question, offered without hesitation, nearly undid her. "I don't even know," she admitted. I just found out this morning. I haven't had time to think." "Then don't think today," Dusty suggested. "Today, you just breathe. Tomorrow is soon enough for decisions." After coffee, Dusty walked her back to the small apartment above her millinery shop. At the door, he hesitated. "I'll be in town for a few days, delivering cattle to the railroad. If you need anything at all, I'm staying at the boarding house." Tabitha found herself oddly reluctant to see him go. "Thank you for the coffee. And for," she gestured vaguely, "for understanding." He tipped his hat. "Get some rest, Miss Donovan." That night, Tabitha couldn't sleep. The reality of Matthew's death crashed over her in waves, along with the practical worries that accompanied it. Without his financial help, how would she keep the shop open? She had some loyal customers, but not enough to cover the rent and supplies on her own. Morning came too soon. Tabitha dressed mechanically, pinning her dark hair into a neat bun. She needed to appear composed and professional, even if she felt like she was crumbling inside. Opening the shop was a routine she clung to, unlocking the door, arranging the displays, checking her inventory of ribbons, feathers, and fabric. The bell over the door jingled around 10 o'clock. Tabitha looked up to see Dusty Grayson, his hat in his hands, looking somewhat out of place among the feminine accessories. "Mr. Grayson," she said, surprised. "Miss Donovan." He cleared his throat. "I thought maybe you could use some help with heavy lifting or whatnot. Anything that needs fixing." Tabitha was about to politely refuse when she remembered the leaking roof in the back room. She'd been asking her landlord to fix it for weeks with no success. "Actually," she said slowly, "there is something." By midday, Dusty had not only repaired the roof, but also fixed the wobbly display stand and the stuck window in her apartment. He worked quietly, efficiently, refusing any payment. "At least let me make you lunch," Tabitha insisted, feeling awkward about accepting so much help. They ate sandwiches in the back room of the shop, and Dusty told her stories of life on the Diamond G Ranch. He had a gift for storytelling, painting vivid pictures of cattle drives and the characters he'd worked with. For brief moments, Tabitha found herself smiling, even laughing, before remembering her grief and falling silent again. "It's all right to laugh," Dusty said gently, noticing her discomfort. "Doesn't mean you're not grieving." "It feels wrong," she admitted, "like I'm betraying Matthew somehow." Dusty shook his head. "Your brother struck me as a man who enjoyed life. I doubt he'd want you to stop living because he did." The bell jingled again, and Tabitha rose to help a customer, Mrs. Hampton, one of the wealthiest women in Sheridan, who ordered at least one new hat every month. "Tabitha, dear," Mrs. Hampton said, removing her gloves, "I heard about your brother. Such a tragedy. I came to order that blue hat we discussed with the matching ribbons." "Thank you, Mrs. Hampton. I'll have it ready by the end of the week." Tabitha was grateful for the order, but knew it wouldn't be enough. After Mrs. Hampton left, she returned to the back room to find Dusty examining her ledger with a frown. He looked up, embarrassed. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't be prying." "It's all right," Tabitha sighed, sitting down heavily. "It's no secret that the shop is struggling. Matthew's help was keeping us afloat. What will you do?" "I don't know," she admitted. "Try to increase business somehow. Take on mending and alterations, perhaps." Dusty hesitated. "I might have an idea. My uncle's been talking about hosting a big social at the Diamond G. His wife's birthday is coming up. A lot of ranchers and their wives would attend. They'd all need new finery." Tabitha straightened. "Are you suggesting that you could supply the ladies with new hats?" "Exactly," Dusty grinned. "And I happen to know my aunt has considerable influence with the society ladies of 3 counties. That would be..." Tabitha didn't want to sound too eager, but such an opportunity could make a significant difference to her struggling business. "I'll speak to my uncle tonight," Dusty promised. "See if we can set something up." True to his word, Dusty returned the next day with news that his aunt was delighted with the idea and had already mentioned it to several friends. Within a week, Tabitha had orders for 15 new hats with promises of more to come. The work kept her busy, giving her less time to dwell on her grief, though Matthew was never far from her thoughts. Dusty stopped by daily, sometimes helping with errands or repairs, other times just bringing coffee and sitting quietly while she worked. His presence became something she looked forward to, a bright spot in days that still held too much darkness. 2 weeks after Matthew's death, Tabitha received another letter, this one from her brother's employer. There was compensation for the accident, not a fortune, but enough to pay off her debts and secure the shop for a while. The relief was overwhelming. That evening, she shared the news with Dusty as they walked along the river outside town. The summer evening was perfect, with fireflies beginning to twinkle along the banks. "I'm glad," Dusty said sincerely. "You deserve some good news." "None of this would have happened without your help," Tabitha said. "You've been so kind, and we barely knew each other before." Dusty stopped walking, turning to face her. "I'd like to know you better," he said quietly, "if you'd allow it." Tabitha felt her heart quicken. In the soft evening light, Dusty's face was earnest, his eyes reflecting the first stars appearing above them. "I think I'd like that too," she answered. He smiled then, a smile that transformed his weather-worn face, making him look younger and somehow vulnerable. "Good," he said simply. Their courtship began slowly, respectfully. Dusty understood that Tabitha was still grieving, still adjusting to her new reality. He never pushed, never demanded, just offered steady companionship and practical help when needed. They took walks together in the evenings, had Sunday dinners, and sometimes just sat in comfortable silence while Tabitha worked on her hats and Dusty read from dog-eared books he carried in his saddlebags. The Diamond G social was a resounding success. Tabitha's hats were admired by every lady present, and she returned to Sheridan with orders that would keep her busy for months. Dusty's aunt, a formidable woman named Eleanor Grayson, took a particular liking to Tabitha and began recommending her work to friends across Wyoming Territory. As summer turned to autumn, Tabitha's grief began to soften around the edges. It was still there, a dull ache that flared at unexpected moments, but increasingly she found joy in her days too. Much of that joy came from Dusty's presence in her life. One crisp October evening, as they walked back from dinner at the hotel, Dusty stopped beneath the great elm tree at the edge of town. He took both her hands in his expression serious. "Tabitha," he began, "I've been offered a job, foreman at a ranch near Cheyenne." Tabitha felt her heart sink. Cheyenne was nearly 200 miles away. "That's wonderful," she managed, trying to sound sincere. "When would you leave?" "That depends," Dusty said, his eyes never leaving hers. "On whether you'd consider coming with me, as my wife." For a moment, Tabitha couldn't speak, couldn't even breathe. "Are you asking me to marry you?" she finally whispered. Dusty nodded, looking suddenly uncertain. "I know it hasn't been that long, and if you need more time, I understand. But I love you, Tabitha. I think I started falling in love that first day in the church." Tears filled Tabitha's eyes, but they were different from the tears she'd shed in the church that day. "I love you too," she said, "but my shop, my life is here." "We could start a new life," Dusty said earnestly. "The ranch has a house, a real house, not just a cabin, and Cheyenne's growing fast. They'd surely need a fine milliner like you." "You've thought this through," Tabitha said, smiling through her tears. "Every detail," Dusty admitted. "Been driving myself half crazy with it for weeks." Tabitha took a deep breath. She thought of Matthew, of how he'd always encouraged her to be brave, to take chances. "Yes," she said firmly. "Yes, I'll marry you and move to Cheyenne." Dusty's face lit up with such joy that Tabitha knew, in that moment, she'd made the right decision. He pulled her close, kissing her with a tenderness that made her heart soar. The news of their engagement spread quickly through Sheridan. Most people were supportive, though a few raised eyebrows at the relatively short courtship. Pastor Mills insisted on counseling them before the wedding, which Dusty endured with good humor for Tabitha's sake. "He asked me if I understood the responsibilities of a husband," Dusty told her after one particularly long session, "as if I haven't been watching my uncle and aunt's marriage my whole life. As if I haven't seen what it takes to build a life together." And what does it take? Tabitha asked, curious. Respect, Dusty said without hesitation. Trust. Working together through good times and bad. And love, of course. But that's the easy part with you. They planned a November wedding, simple but elegant. Tabitha made her own wedding hat, a confection of ivory silk and seed pearls that complemented the modest dress she ordered from the dressmaker in town. Dusty's Aunt Eleanor arrived a week before the ceremony, bringing a trunk full of household linens and kitchen implements as a wedding gift. Every bride needs a proper hope chest, she declared, unpacking fine tablecloths and hand-embroidered napkins. And you'll need these things in your new home. Eleanor also brought the unexpected gift of stories about Dusty's childhood tales, of a serious, responsible boy who looked after his cousins and learned ranching from his uncle after his own father's death. He's a good man, Eleanor told Tabitha the night before the wedding, steady, reliable. He doesn't give his heart easily, but when he does, it's complete. I know, Tabitha said softly. I'll take good care of him. Eleanor squeezed her hand. You already do. I've seen how he looks at you. Like you're the answer to a prayer he didn't even know he was saying. The wedding day dawned clear and cold, with a dusting of early snow that made the world look fresh and new. Tabitha stood before the small mirror in her apartment, adjusting her hat and wondering if Matthew was watching from somewhere beyond. She hoped he approved of Dusty, of the life she was choosing. The church was full not just with the people of Sheridan, but with ranchers and cowboys from the surrounding area, many of whom knew Dusty from his work at the Diamond G. When Tabitha walked down the aisle alone, her eyes found Dusty immediately. He stood tall and straight in a new black suit, his usual weathered hat replaced by neatly combed hair. The love in his eyes when he saw her was so palpable that Tabitha felt it like a physical touch. Pastor Mills performed the ceremony with genuine warmth, seeming to have overcome his initial reservations about the couple. When he pronounced them husband and wife, Dusty's kiss was gentle but filled with promise, drawing good-natured cheers from the assembly. The celebration afterward at the town hall was joyous, with music and dancing and enough food to feed twice the number of guests. Dusty rarely left Tabitha's side, though he did take a turn dancing with his aunt and with Mrs. Hampton, who had become one of Tabitha's most vocal supporters. Late in the evening, as the party continued around them, Dusty led Tabitha outside for a moment of quiet. The night was clear, stars blazing in the black Wyoming sky. "Happy, Mrs. Grayson?" he asked, his arm warm around her waist. "Very happy, Mr. Grayson," she replied, leaning her head against his shoulder. "And a little scared, too." "Of what?" "Of changing everything. Leaving Sheridan, starting over in Cheyenne." Dusty turned her gently to face him. "We'll face it together," he promised. "Whatever comes." The journey to Cheyenne took 5 days by wagon, traveling south through the vast Wyoming landscape. Tabitha had sold her shop to Mrs. Hampton's daughter, who had long expressed interest in the millinery business. The money from the sale, combined with her savings and Matthew's compensation, gave them a comfortable start in their new life. The ranch outside Cheyenne was everything Dusty had described: 5,000 acres of good grazing land with a substantial house built by the previous foreman. It needed some work, but the bones were solid, with 4 proper bedrooms, a large kitchen, and a parlor with real glass windows that looked out over the rolling prairie. "What do you think?" Dusty asked anxiously as he showed Tabitha through the rooms. "We can change anything you don't like." Tabitha turned slowly, taking in the high ceilings, the well-made furniture, the fireplace that would keep them warm through the Wyoming winters. "It's perfect," she said honestly. "It just needs a woman's touch." And so began their life together. Dusty proved to be as good a foreman as he had been a ranch hand, managing the owner's cattle and the team of cowboys with firm but fair leadership. Tabitha set up a workroom in one of the spare bedrooms, continuing her millinery business on a smaller scale while learning to be a rancher's wife, a role that included everything from cooking for hungry cowboys to helping birth calves in the depths of winter. The work was hard but satisfying. Tabitha found that the skills she'd developed running her own business served her well in managing the household accounts and supplies. Dusty, true to his word, treated her as a full partner in their life together, consulting her on decisions and respecting her opinions. Their first Christmas as a married couple was a quiet celebration, just the two of them in their new home. Dusty gave Tabitha a silver locket with space for miniature portraits. "For family," he explained as she opened it, "present and future." Tabitha's gift to him was a handcrafted leather-bound journal. "For your stories," she said. "I want to make sure they're preserved." Dusty, who had never considered his tales worthy of recording, was deeply touched by the gesture. As winter gave way to spring, Tabitha began to suspect that they might be adding to their family sooner than expected. By April, she was certain, and one evening after dinner, she shared the news with Dusty. "A baby," he repeated, his face a mixture of shock and wonder. "We're going to have a baby?" Tabitha nodded, suddenly nervous. They had talked about children, of course, but perhaps not so soon. "Are you happy about it?" she asked. In answer, Dusty swept her into his arms, holding her as if she were made of the finest porcelain. "Happy doesn't begin to describe it," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Tabitha, you've given me everything I never dared hope for." The months of Tabitha's pregnancy passed in a blur of preparations. Dusty insisted on hiring help for the household, bringing in a capable woman from Cheyenne to manage the cooking and cleaning so Tabitha could rest. He built a cradle with his own hands, working on it in the evenings while Tabitha sewed tiny gowns and blankets. The baby arrived in late November, almost exactly a year after their wedding. After a difficult labor, their son was born a healthy, robust boy with Dusty's blue eyes and a shock of dark hair like Tabitha's. They named him Matthew Daniel Grayson, honoring both Tabitha's brother and Dusty's father. Holding his son for the first time, Dusty was transformed. This man who handled difficult horses and managed rough cowboys with ease looked terrified of the tiny bundle in his arms. "He's so small," he whispered, awestruck. "But strong," Tabitha said, watching them together, "like his father." Young Matthew thrived, growing rapidly into a curious, active baby who delighted his parents with each new achievement. Dusty proved to be a devoted father, often carrying Matthew with him around the ranch in a special sling he'd devised, proudly showing his son the cattle and horses that would one day be his legacy. Tabitha's millinery business expanded unexpectedly when the wife of the territorial governor visited the ranch and admired her work. Soon, Tabitha was creating hats for the most influential women in Cheyenne, her reputation spreading far beyond Wyoming. Life settled into a pleasant rhythm. The ranch prospered under Dusty's management, and their home became known for its hospitality. On Sundays, the cowboys who had nowhere else to go were welcome at the Grayson table, and Tabitha made sure there was always extra food and a kind word for any traveler who stopped at their door. In the spring of 1881, when Matthew was a sturdy toddler of 16 months, Dusty received a letter that would change their lives again. His Uncle George, owner of the Diamond G, had suffered a serious stroke. Aunt Eleanor was struggling to manage the ranch alone. "We need to go to them," Dusty said immediately, showing Tabitha the letter, at least for a visit to see what help they need. The journey back to Sheridan was easier than their departure had been, traveling by train most of the way with little Matthew fascinated by the passing scenery. They found the Diamond G much as Dusty remembered it, though his uncle was a shadow of his former robust self, confined to a chair and struggling to speak clearly. "The doctor says he won't fully recover," Aunt Eleanor told them privately. "He can't manage the ranch anymore, and I'm not getting any younger either." "What will you do?" Tabitha asked, bouncing Matthew on her knee. Eleanor looked directly at Dusty. "We want you to take over the Diamond G," she said. "You're family, and there's no one we trust more. We'd sign it over to you now, with the understanding that you'd provide for us for whatever time we have left." Dusty was stunned. "The whole ranch? It's too much, Aunt Eleanor. I couldn't possibly accept—" "You can and you will," Eleanor interrupted firmly. "You're our only family, Dusty. Who else would we leave it to? Some stranger? Besides, you learned ranching here. You know this land better than anyone except your uncle." That night, Dusty and Tabitha discussed the offer in their guest room, keeping their voices low so as not to wake Matthew, who slept soundly in a small bed nearby. "It's a tremendous responsibility," Dusty said, pacing the floor. "The Diamond G is 3 times the size of the ranch we're managing now. But it's also an incredible opportunity," Tabitha pointed out. "For us, for Matthew, and it would mean being closer to Aunt Eleanor and Uncle George in their final years. What about your business in Cheyenne, the connections you've built?" Tabitha smiled. "I built a business from nothing in Sheridan once. I can do it again. Besides, it would be nice for Matthew to grow up where we met, where our story began." Dusty sat beside her on the bed, taking her hands in his. "Are you sure? It would mean another big change." "Life is change," Tabitha said softly, "and as long as we're together, I'm not afraid of it." The decision was made. Dusty sent word to his employer in Cheyenne, who was disappointed but understanding. By summer, the legal papers were drawn up, transferring ownership of the Diamond G to Dusty with provisions for George and Eleanor's care. Moving back to Sheridan felt like coming full circle. Many of the townspeople remembered them, welcoming them back with genuine warmth. Tabitha reopened her millinery shop in a small space off the main street, balancing her business with her roles as mother and ranch wife. The Diamond G flourished under Dusty's management. He implemented new breeding programs and modernized some of the operations while maintaining the traditions and practices that had made the ranch successful for decades. Uncle George, though physically diminished, became Dusty's valued advisor, his mind still sharp despite his halting speech. In the fall of 1882, Tabitha gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Eleanor Rose, after Dusty's aunt and Tabitha's mother. Little Ellie, as they called her, was a peaceful baby with a sunny disposition that endeared her to everyone at the ranch. Life on the Diamond G settled into a pattern of hard work and simple pleasures. Matthew grew into a sturdy, inquisitive boy who shadowed his father around the ranch, soaking up knowledge of cattle and horses. Ellie became Aunt Eleanor's special favorite, often sitting with the older woman while she taught her to sew and shared stories of the early days in Wyoming Territory. The years passed with the rhythm of the seasons: spring calving, summer roundups, fall cattle drives, winter preparations. The Diamond G expanded under Dusty's leadership, acquiring neighboring lands when they became available, becoming one of the largest and most respected ranches in northern Wyoming. Tabitha's millinery business thrived as well. She trained several apprentices and expanded into dressmaking, catering to the growing population of Sheridan and the surrounding areas. Her designs were sought after not just locally, but by customers as far away as Denver and Salt Lake City. Uncle George passed peacefully in the winter of 1885, leaving Aunt Eleanor bereft, but surrounded by the family that loved her. She moved from the main ranch house into a comfortable cottage that Dusty built especially for her, close enough to participate in family life, but with privacy and independence. In 1887, their family expanded again with the birth of twin boys, Thomas and Timothy, who arrived during one of the worst blizzards in Wyoming history. Dusty had to ride through the storm to fetch the doctor, a journey that nearly cost him his life. When he finally returned, half frozen but with the doctor in tow, he found that Tabitha had already delivered 2 healthy sons with only Aunt Eleanor's help. "Don't you ever scare me like that again," he told Tabitha when they were finally alone, the twins sleeping peacefully in their cradle. "I thought I might lose all 3 of you. It would take more than a blizzard and a pair of impatient babies to separate me from you," Tabitha assured him, exhausted but radiant. As the children grew, the Grayson home became known as a center of warmth and hospitality. Sunday dinners regularly included not just family, but ranch hands, neighbors, and any travelers passing through. Dusty and Tabitha maintained an open-door policy, remembering well their own experiences with kindness from strangers. Matthew, their firstborn, showed a natural talent for ranching from an early age. By 12, he could ride as well as many of the cowboys and had an intuitive understanding of cattle that impressed even the most experienced hands. Ellie inherited her mother's artistic talents and business acumen, helping in the millinery shop from the time she could thread a needle. The twins, though identical in appearance, developed distinctly different personalities. Thomas quiet and thoughtful, Timothy bold and adventurous. In the summer of 1893, 15 years after Dusty had first taken Tabitha's hand in that small church, they renewed their wedding vows in a ceremony attended by their children, Aunt Eleanor, now in her 80s but still sharp-witted, and the many friends they'd made over the years. Standing before Pastor Turner, Pastor Mills having retired years earlier, Tabitha looked into Dusty's eyes, still that same summer sky blue, though now crinkled at the corners from years of squinting in the Wyoming sun, and felt the same rush of love she'd experienced when he'd proposed under the elm tree all those years ago. "I would choose you again," she whispered as they exchanged rings, "every time." "And I you," Dusty replied, his voice husky with emotion, "every moment of every day." After the ceremony, as friends and family celebrated around them, Dusty led Tabitha away from the crowd, just as he had on their wedding day. They walked to the hill overlooking the ranch, where the view stretched for miles across the land they had nurtured together. "Did you ever imagine that day in the church that we'd build all this?" Tabitha asked, gesturing to the sprawling ranch below them, the main house. The bunkhouses, the barns and corrals, all evidence of years of hard work and dedication. Dusty shook his head. "I just knew I couldn't let you sit there alone with your grief. Everything else." He smiled, taking her hand. "Everything else was a blessing I never dared hope for." "Even when the twins were colicky for 3 months straight," Tabitha teased, "or when Matthew decided to help the new foals and nearly got trampled." "Even then," Dusty affirmed, laughing, "though I might have questioned my blessings a bit during that winter when all 4 children had the measles at once." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun begin its descent toward the western horizon. In the distance, they could see Matthew teaching Ellie and the twins to rope, their children's laughter carrying on the warm summer breeze. "We've been lucky," Tabitha said softly. "Not luck," Dusty corrected gently. "Blessed. There's a difference." As they walked back to join the celebration, Tabitha thought about the path that had led them here from that moment of profound grief in a small church to this life overflowing with love and purpose. She remembered how lost she had felt, how alone, and how a stranger's kindness had changed everything. "No man preaches over your pain," Dusty had said that day. Simple words that had recognized her grief, respected it, and offered not platitudes, but practical comfort. Looking at him now, surrounded by their family and friends, Tabitha knew that those words had been the beginning of a love story greater than she could have imagined. That night, after the guests had departed and the children were asleep, Dusty and Tabitha sat on the porch of their home, watching the stars emerge in the vast Wyoming sky. Dusty's arm was warm around her shoulders, a familiar comfort that had never diminished with time. 15 years, he mused. Seems like yesterday and forever all at once. "The best 15 years, Tabitha agreed, leaning against him, "though I hope we have at least that many more ahead of us." "Count on it," Dusty said firmly. "I'm not going anywhere without you, Tabitha Grayson, not in this life or whatever comes after." As the night deepened around them, they remained on the porch, talking softly about memories and plans for the future. They spoke of Matthew's intention to attend agricultural college back east, of Ellie's growing talent for design, of the twins' latest adventures and misadventures. When they finally went inside, hand in hand as they had been for 15 years, Tabitha paused in the doorway of their home. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" Dusty asked, puzzled. "For taking my hand that day in church, for seeing my pain and respecting it, for building this life with me." Dusty's smile was tender as he drew her close. "Best decision I ever made," he whispered against her hair, "and one I'd make again every day for the rest of our lives." The next morning dawned clear and bright, another day on the Diamond G Ranch. Tabitha woke early, as was her habit, and stood at the window watching the sun rise over the land she had come to love. Dusty still slept, his face peaceful in repose, years of hard work and responsibility momentarily smoothed away. She thought of the young woman she had been, sitting alone in that church with a letter that seemed to end all hope. How could she have known then that her greatest joy was yet to come, that the hand reaching for hers in that moment of deepest grief would be the same hand that would hold hers through a lifetime of love and partnership? As if sensing her thoughts, Dusty stirred, opening his eyes to find her watching him. He smiled, that same smile that had first warmed her heart 15 years ago. "Good morning, Mrs. Grayson," he said softly. "Good morning, Mr. Grayson," she replied, returning to sit on the edge of the bed. "Ready for another day?" Dusty reached for her hand, his touch as familiar and essential as her own heartbeat. "With you? Always." And as the day began around them, children waking, ranch hands starting their chores, cattle lowing in the distance, Tabitha Grayson knew with absolute certainty that the life they had built together was richer and more beautiful than any she could have imagined that day in church, when a kind-hearted cowboy had taken her hand and changed her world forever. In the years that followed, the Grayson family continued to grow and thrive. Matthew returned from agricultural college with new ideas for the ranch and eventually married the daughter of a neighboring rancher, building a home of his own on Diamond G land. Ellie took over Tabitha's millinery business, expanding it into a successful clothing store that catered to the changing fashions of the new century. The twins, Thomas and Timothy, found their own paths, Thomas as a teacher in the Sheridan School, Timothy as a skilled horse trainer whose reputation spread throughout the territory. Dusty and Tabitha remained the heart of the family, their love a constant that anchored them all through the inevitable challenges and changes that life brought. And when newcomers to Sheridan asked how such a successful family had begun, they would often hear the story of a grief-stricken young woman sitting silent in church, and the compassionate cowboy who took her hand, saying, "No man preaches over your pain." It was a story that would be passed down through generations of Graysons, a testament to the power of kindness, the resilience of the human heart, and the enduring strength of love that begins with a simple act of compassion.